his age, he was and remains the serene and confident servant of the grand design. This is Masonic signal language. Here is John Paul II with the Trilateral Commission. And here is John Paul II with B'nai B'rith, Jewish Freemasonry. This is a fascinating signal picture with him in the center controlling the most powerful think tanks in the world. Because the building of a new world. It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause. Only the United States has said that the beast that comes up out of the earth would be the power that did it. Bush confirms that for us. By 1990, the establishment stands for are only against in the sense that they are playing the game of Hegelianism. Thesis, antithesis. But behind the scenes, under the guidance and light of Leo's encyclical, Rerum Novarum was thus involved a truly Christian social science, which continues to be fostered and enriched. And these Catholic principles of sociology gradually became the part of the intellectual heritage of the whole human race. In the form of institutions, the state becomes chiefly to mind. Not as if universal well-being were to be expected from its activities. And what is the state going to do in all of this? The experiment with economic freedom, Pius wrote, must end. And economic life must again be subjected to planning and government. Who wants to control your economic life? Government. John Paul II wrote in his Solicitudo Re Socialis on social concern, it is necessary to state once more the characteristic principle of Christian social doctrine. The goods of this world, wrote, a faithful echo of the centuries-old tradition of the Church regarding the universal purpose of good. In today's world, wrote the Pope, we are faced with a serious problem of unequal distribution of the means of subsistence originally meant for everybody. Then came liberation theology, and Pius wrote an encyclical on atheistic communism, an age like ours, where unusual misery has resulted. Who created the misery? They created it so that they can create the solution which they want. So, in Africa, they elevate a few and suppress the masses. Then they turn it around and they create the situation that they want. They create communism, they create the chaos. Out of the chaos, they create the social order which they want. So the second reign of terror was supported by the papacy. Father Camilo Terres, who was shot in 1966, declared, the Catholic who is not a revolutionary is living in mortal sin. Pope John Paul, better distribution of goods, including earthly goods, such as education, health service, housing, and so forth. Now we come to human rights. What did we read about in the French Revolution? What's going to be the standard of the world? Human rights. You have a right to property. You have a right to anything that you have need of. We are convinced that the theology of liberation is not only timely, but useful and necessary. That's what the Pope says, not me. This is his words directly. John Paul II, letter to Brazilian bishops. It should constitute a new stage of the theological reflection initiated within the apostolic tradition. And then he refers to Rerum Novarum. Franklin Roosevelt, when he was elected, he made Professor Ryan part of his administration. Now, who was he? Ryan wrote in 1931, the workers have to enforce it upon industry. See how it starts? Right. Now, let's look at some of the human rights. You have a right to freely found unions for working people. You have a right to culture, a right to emigrate, a right to immigrate, a right to food, a right to clothing, a right to rest, a right to medical care, a right to just wage, a right to life, a right to safe environment, a right to personal security of workers, a right to family life, a right to private property, highly qualified, of course. A right to common use of all goods is just thereafter, so that means nothing. A right to work, a right to pension, a right to old age, insurance, a right to association, a right to security, a right to integrity, a right to social services, a right to strike, a right to choose a state of life freely, a right to found a family, a right to education, employment, good reputation, respect, appropriate information, a right by the upright, blah, 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 protection of privacy, right for freedom, professional training, quality, right to adequate health care. Oh, it's laborious. How do you control that? How do you control it? If you're going to control every aspect of that, then you must control every aspect of a person's life. You will not be able to go to the toilet in future without making a triple application to the Vatican. They're going to control every single aspect of your lives. That's what they're going to control. And government is going to become super huge. Now, where's the money going to come from? From you. Now, when the money comes from you, what then happens to your wealth? It gets less and less and less and less. That means the middle class will disappear. How many classes under Catholicism in the Middle Ages? 2. There was a feudal class, the Goyim, and there was the upper class who controlled everything. Now, if we take employment, in my country, employment was running at almost 50%. In Germany, it was running at point-something%. And then it went up to 2, 3, 5, 10, 20%. Now unemployment is rife in Europe. Why? Because all the East Bloc countries are now being incorporated into Europe, and there must be redistribution of wealth. And so it's coming down, 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 down. The recent surveys don't ask where you live. They say, how many rooms have you got? How many people live there? How many this? How many that? When did they do that, and in what country? In communism. And what happened if your house was bigger than your need? The one who had the need got it. But who has to pay for it? You, because you own it. It's even worse now than in communism, right? So they came to our country. Now you have to register in each individual location. And you may not vote outside your location, so that they have your location attached to your name. And then they came to my house and they said, they want to know, what is my religion? I said, I'm a Christian. They said, which denomination are you? I said, it's none of your business. They said, it is my business. Which denomination are you? I said, it's none of your business. How many rooms have you got? I said, enough. We want to know exactly how many rooms you have. I said, I have enough. Well, we want to know exactly. It's got nothing to do with you. Why do you want to know exactly? I could have another one next week, or I could put a wall in and I could have 2, right? So none of your business. You get into big trouble if you answer questions like that. You're not supposed to do that. Therefore, there must be made available to all men everything necessary for leading a life truly human. Did you know that living a life truly human is the Catholic acronym for salvation? And I will prove this to you in a future lecture, where they say to be saved means to live a life truly human. That means the kingdom of God for Catholicism is the kingdom of Catholicism ruling the world on this earth, and giving everyone the capacity to live a life truly human. That means enough to take care of your basic needs and nothing else. Do you like the New World Order? Do you like it? Do you know what? The Bible calls him the man of sin. Now, there's another word for the redistribution of wealth, and I've given it to you already. What is it? It's called theft. That's right. The Bible says, thou shalt not steal. That means, thou shalt not take from one who has and give it to someone else. That's called theft. That's breaking the commandments of God. Is that correct? Yes. We will see that this system of human rights breaks every single commandment of God as we go along. When God distributed land to Israel, how was it distributed? As an eternal inheritance. It was your land. Ahab wanted Naboth's vineyard. And Naboth said to him, I will not sin against the Lord my God, because this land has been given to me as an eternal inheritance and to my children. God gives each one a piece that is his. They take it and distribute it according to need, but you pay the bill. Fascinating. The complex circumstance of our day makes it necessary for public authority to intervene more often in social, economic, and cultural matters. The Second Vatican Council, that's what it said. So they're going to intervene at every level of your life. Lord von Gorbachev for den Papst. Gorbachev praises the Pope, and he says the Pope is right in his demand for a new world order. In 1991, the San Francisco Chronicle already said Pope calls for a new world order. Albert Einstein says, mankind's desire for peace can be realized only by the creation of a world government. With all my heart, I believe that the world's present system of sovereign nations can only lead to barbarism, war, and inhumanity, and that only law can assure progress towards a civilized, peaceful humanity. Interesting statement, Albert Einstein. What did he also state? He says there is no salvation for civilization or even the human race other than to creation of a world government. That was Albert Einstein. What did Hugh Tunt, former Secretary General of the United Nations, say? He said, world federalists hold before us the vision of a unified mankind living in peace under a just world order. The heart of their program, a world under law, is realistic and attainable. What did Mortimer Adler say? World peace is impossible without world government. Winston Churchill. These are big names. I'm not talking about small fry. The creation of an authoritative world order is the ultimate aim towards which we must strive. Charles de Gaulle, nations must unite in a world government or perish. How do you do that? How about creating so much conflict that everybody will be willing to give up their sovereignty? Do you know what? In South Africa, I give these lectures to the public. The people are in despair. They are being robbed, driven off their land, they're being murdered. Our houses look like prisons. We cannot go to sleep without locking everything. In my very own little block, we've had murder after murder after murder, and robberies, aggravating robberies, and nothing seems to happen. The police don't even care. They don't even come out. Because there is so much turmoil all over the place that they cannot even cope with it. So who cares about your little problem that you've just lost everything? Take it to the insurance and see if you can get it back. Irrespective of the pain. They come in, they move in, they take all your private papers, they burn them. You have no record of your life, everything's gone. They sell the furniture they don't want, and the rest they keep for themselves and say, get lost. It's now time for redistribution. You had land before, now it's my land. That's how it goes. This is the New World Order. Welcome to the New World Order. Bertrand Russell, the only possibilities are now world government or death. The Humanist Manifesto, too, urges us to move towards the building of a world community. Robert Miller, former Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, said, we must move as quickly as possible to a one-world government, a one-world religion, under a one-world leader. I wonder who that is going to be. These are big names that I'm putting on the screen. These aren't speculators here and there. I'm often accused for speculating. Well, the biggest speculators are these people themselves. And what about this man? We saw how peace and unity was to come about.
It was great.
A great feeling of excitement, of peace,
unity,
of love. Peace, love, and unity.
Unity.
Yes.
All nations will come and
Pope calls for a new world order. CNN, Thursday, January 1, 2004. He made his whole New Year's speech revolve around the new world order. I want to tell you today that the new world order is intended not just to unite the nations which God had separated, that's one aspect, but to eradicate Protestantism off the face of the earth. And particularly that form of Protestantism which refuses to bow to the papal Caesar. That form of Protestantism will have to go. And we will see that under the circumstances that will be created, these conditions are all in place right now. It is all there. And I will put it on the screen for you, so don't miss the next lectures. Now we're getting into hot territory. I'll put the quotes on the screen where they will tell you who the problem children are going to be. And don't think it's Islam. It's someone else. Don't miss the next exciting episodes. But before I go, I would like to remind you that Jesus said that this was going to happen. And if I know, and if I understand with my whole mind and with my whole heart, that Satan, because the dragon gave him his power and great authority, is setting up his kingdom here upon this earth, then instead of becoming disillusioned, frightened, hysterical, I know that the time must be very short, isn't that right? And I know that the Lord must be coming very soon. So, as far as I'm concerned, I have distanced myself from my property. If I literally had to come home next week and find my wife somewhere in another little room and my house occupied by whomever, then I will say, tough cheese, it's going to blow up anyway, who cares? It's going to be destroyed when the Lord comes by the brightness of His coming. Why not take it now? Have fun while you can. And I'll move on somewhere else. I don't mind building a tree house for a little while. That should be okay. If they take my cars, well, that's okay too. We'll get another one, and if we can't afford another one, we'll walk. Who cares? I really don't care anymore. But people who are losing things become desperate, and what do? They commit suicide. By the thousands, people are committing suicide. If they understand this message, and they understand where we are going, would they then commit suicide? No. They gather hope. They say, wow, so we're part of a big exciting end game. And this is exactly what is happening. People are getting hope, and they're giving their lives to the Lord Jesus Christ, and they are saying, Lord, save me, not only from my sin, but save me from this world. I am longing for your kingdom. Do you know what the government policy is in the kingdom of God? I've already told you. Everyone in the kingdom of God gets a dwelling place in the city built by whom? By God. And it has your name on it. Did you know that? You have a city dwelling. In the new world, what happens? God says, no longer will they build houses and others live in them. So what are you going to do? They will build houses, says the Bible, and they will plant vineyards. And no longer will you plant vineyards and others eat of them. What does that mean? That means you will have a country dwelling where you will have a farm which God will bless. And who does it belong to? To you. For how long? Forever. Forever and ever and ever and ever. That's God's policy. So who cares about what they're going to do? Who cares? And eye has not seen, nor ear has heard the wonders that God has prepared for them that love Him. That does not just include the glory of seeing our King in heaven. It includes everything that goes into making life pleasant. And the new kingdom is worthy of waiting for. Really. I look forward to the new kingdom of God. It'll be a great place. And we will unfortunately see this world go from bad to worse. And I don't want to lie to you and say it's going to get better. I'm going to tell you it's going to get worse. Very much worse. What happened in the French Revolution is the forerunner of what will happen in the entire world. There will be anarchy like you cannot believe. But if you are under the protection of the Most High, nothing will happen to you. So why not accept Him? Why not say, Lord Jesus, I want you to be my personal Savior. Why not say, Lord, clean up my life. Let's walk together. Because your government is the only one worth having. And imagine looking in His face and saying, wow, this is my God. I've waited for Him. He will save me. Heroes of Flight 93. The official version is that this plane was heading, let's say, for example, for the White House or for the Capitol building, but that some heroes on board overpowered the pilot, and then the plane crashed onto the ground, killing all the occupants. Very fascinating stuff. By the way, of all the 4 airplanes involved, no black box has been found. No black box. They are designed to withstand such crashes. There is not one that has remained. Now at Shanksville, what happened here? Now this we don't have in English, it's in German. So subtitles have been put underneath and you can read it in English as you go along. And we can see what happened. Here the people come and they now interview the mayor of Shanksville, who was one of the first at the scene, as to what actually was present when they arrived. And you will find something very interesting.
Ernie Style, der Bürgermeister der nahegelegenen Gemeinde Shanksville, erinnert sich.
Ja, mein Schwager und ein guter Freund von mir waren die Ersten hier. Sie haben in Shanksville an einer Straßenecke gestanden und sich unterhalten. Ihr Wagen stand gleich in der Nähe und so waren sie die Ersten hier. Dann kam erst die Feuerwehr. Alle waren wie vor den Kopf gestoßen, weil sie zu einem Flugzeugabsturz gerufen wurden. Aber da war kein Flugzeug. Kein Flugzeug.
Sie wurden hier zu der Unfallstelle geschickt und da war kein Flugzeug?
Nein, da war nichts. Nur dieses Loch. Das ist es, was Sie sahen.
Ich dachte immer, das sei die Absturzstelle.
Das ist sie. Aber da ist nichts zu sehen. Das Flugzeug hat sich total zerlegt. Puff. Es krachte auf den Boden und löste sich auf. Vollkommen.
Sage.
Flugzeugtrümmer? Nicht.
Stolz präsentiert die Fotografin ihr Werk genau an der Stelle, von der aus sie das Bild geknipst hat. Eine pilzförmige Rauchsäule, wie sie auch von anderen Augenzeugen beobachtet wurde.
Das ist das, was wir gesehen haben. Sieht fast aus wie ein Pilz.
Afghanistan. Nach einem Bombeneinschlag bildet sich genau die gleiche pilzförmige Rauchsäule wie in Shanksville. es doch eine Bombe oder eine Rakete?
That's an interesting story. So here you have an interview with the eyewitnesses that come to the crash site, and there's no airplane. But there's a hole in the ground. And in the hole, nothing. No airplane. No airplane debris, nothing. Just a hole in the ground, in which a whole Boeing disappeared, totally dissolving itself, with nothing to show. Interestingly, they have the bodies of every single one that was on board, but there's no airplane. Now, that is weird. You must admit, that's kind of weird. And that is the picture of the actual cloud that formed. This photographer just happened to be there when it happened. And that is the cloud that forms when a bomb hits, like they used in Afghanistan. And the question was asked, was it perhaps a bomb and not an aeroplane at all? And where is the aeroplane? We wouldn't know, it's gone. Now, nowhere in the history of the world has an airplane like that just disappeared. I mean, imagine when your shuttle exploded up there, what a terrible disaster that was. And that was like a nuclear explosion in mid-air. They could almost reconstruct that shuttle from all the debris that they put together. Isn't that correct? And here, nothing? Nothing? No airplane? It's gone? No airplane. Very interesting. Let's go and look at what happened at the Pentagon. Amongst reports circulating is the report that there was an explosion in the Pentagon. Now, according to this, an airplane flew into the Pentagon. Let's have a look. What was aired on national television abroad?
Von einer Explosion ohne jegliche Beteiligung eines Flugzeugs im Inneren des Pentagon wird berichtet. Übrigens, die Fassade knickte erst später ein. Das war keine unmittelbare Folge des Aufpralls. Direkt auf den eben renovierten Teil des Pentagon zu. Nachdem das Flugzeug auf den ersten Gebäudering aufprallte, durchschlug es noch 2 weitere Ringe, um am Ende dieses 1,80 Meter große Loch zu hinterlassen. Wie schon bei dem Absturz in Shanksville löste sich auch hier das Flugzeug in Luft auf, beziehungsweise pulverisiert. Auch nicht im Inneren des Gebäudes. Dafür nichtssagende Details. Eine Uhr, ein verkohltes Telefon, verrußte Räume. Einrichtungsgegenstände.
Well, there you have it. That's the second one. Here comes an airplane, crashes into the Pentagon, goes through a hole, leaves a hole 1.8 meters wide. A whole airplane leaves a hole 1.8 meters wide. The rest of it collapsed later. Inside the building, no airplane debris. It's completely dissolved, gone. But there are clocks and there are telephones and furniture. They seem to have survived. Nothing else. No engine block, no nothing survived. No airplane. Whereas, if you go to the World Trade Center, where everybody saw the airplanes fly in, what do you find there? This is the situation.
Ganz anders die Situation am World Trade Center. Trotz der viel massiveren Zerstörung stolpert man hier förmlich über Flugzeugteile.
There was no problem there. That was a massive explosion. If anything should have ripped those planes apart, it should have been there. But there's lots of debris of airplanes. But at the Pentagon, nothing. Not a thing. At Shanksville, nothing. No airplane. Dissolved. Completely. So no wonder this Frenchman over here, Thierry Messon, says, das Böse sitzt im Pentagon. The evil, is it in the Pentagon? This is the man who came up with some of this theory. Who was it? What happened over here? And was it perhaps totally different to what people are saying? These are pictures that were released. Interesting that the date says September 12th. They say that it's because they released it the next day. Here is the sight of the plane when it is about to crash, and then suddenly a black picture, nothing, and then you have a flame. But there's no airplane, nothing. Now, when an airplane lands on an open field at this low, and it's struck right at the bottom, then the landing gear comes down automatically once the altimeter reads that, and there would be a line of destruction in the lawn like you cannot believe, but there's nothing, just that hole. And this is the cloud of flame that one sees, and this tiny hole in the building, which then later collapsed. Any debris that you see lying outside has nothing to do with the Boeing, has nothing to do with an airplane. So there's no debris from an airplane at all. Gone. The fact of the matter is that immediately after these events, the power was granted to act internationally. And you had massive legislation, homeland response, all of these things came in. Now, I'm not saying who it was, I'm not saying what transpired, I'm just giving you the facts as they were, and you decide whether the official version is okay with you.